The gunshot that killed Thomas Caldwell echoed through the canyon long after his body went cold. But it was the silence that followed in the weeks after his burial that nearly destroyed his widow. Helena Caldwell stood on the porch of her small ranch house outside Alta, Utah, in the spring of 1878, watching three riders approach with the kind of inevitability that feels like fate closing its fist around your throat. She knew who they were before they dismounted, knew what they wanted, and knew she had nothing to give them except the deed to land that had been in her family since before the war. The leader was a man called Sutton, thick through the middle with eyes like chips of flint. He did not bother with pleasantries as he climbed the steps, his boots heavy on the weathered wood. "Mrs. Caldwell, your husband owed Mr. Garrett $3,000. That debt does not die with him." Helena felt the words like a physical blow. $3,000. She had known Thomas gambled, had suspected he borrowed money, but this sum was impossible. "I do not have that kind of money. I barely have enough to feed myself through the summer." "Then Mr. Garrett will take the ranch," Sutton said simply. "You have until the end of the month to vacate or come up with the full amount." He paused, letting his gaze travel over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "Or we could discuss other arrangements." "Get off my land," Helena said, her voice steadier than she felt. Sutton smiled without warmth. 3 weeks, Mrs. Caldwell. Think carefully about your options." She watched them ride away, her hands gripping the porch railing so hard her knuckles went white. The sun was setting over the Wasatch Mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that seemed cruel in their beauty. Thomas had been dead 6 weeks, buried in the small cemetery on the hill where wildflowers were just beginning to bloom, and already the life they had built together was crumbling like sand through her fingers. That night, she lay awake in the bed that still smelled faintly of her husband, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure a way out of this trap. She could sell everything, the cattle, the horses, the furniture, but it would not come close to $3,000. She could write to her sister in Denver, but Caroline had her own family to worry about and no money to spare. She could run, pack what she could carry and disappear into the territories, but Garrett's men would find her eventually. Men like that always did. Sleep came in fits and starts, filled with dreams of Thomas alive and laughing, then dead-eyed and silent. She woke to gray dawn light filtering through thin curtains and the sound of someone chopping wood behind the house. Helena grabbed the rifle from beside the door and went outside barefoot, her nightgown billowing in the cold morning wind. A man stood by the woodpile, his back to her, bringing down an axe with practiced efficiency. He was tall and lean, wearing a dusty brown coat and a hat that had seen better days. A dappled gray horse stood tied to the fence nearby, watching her with calm, dark eyes. "Who are you and what are you doing on my property?" Helena called out, raising the rifle. The man turned slowly, setting the axe down before raising his hands to show they were empty. "Name is Isaiah Jennings, madam. I was passing through and saw your woodpile was getting low. Figured I would help out before I moved on." "I did not ask for your help," Helena said, though she lowered the rifle slightly. Isaiah Jennings had a face that spoke of hard years and harder miles, weathered and tanned by sun and wind. His eyes were an unusual shade of gray-green, and they met hers with a directness that was neither challenging nor submissive. "No, madam, you did not," he agreed. "But I have been traveling a long time and could use a hot meal and maybe some water for my horse. Thought I would earn it." Helena studied him for a long moment. Every instinct told her to send him away, that she did not need complications or strangers, but there was something in his face that suggested honesty. And God knew she could use the wood. There is coffee on the stove and biscuits from yesterday. You can water your horse at the trough. Much obliged, Isaiah said, tipping his hat. She went inside to dress properly, her hands shaking as she buttoned her black mourning dress. When she emerged, Isaiah had finished with the wood and was tending to his horse, speaking to the animal in low, soothing tones. She watched him through the window as she poured coffee into 2 tin cups, noting the way he moved with careful economy, nothing wasted, nothing hurried. He came inside when she called, removing his hat and standing awkwardly just inside the door until she gestured to the table. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the clink of cups and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. You are a long way from anywhere, Isaiah said eventually. This ranch is pretty isolated. My husband liked the solitude, Helena replied, the words catching in her throat. He is buried on the hill behind the house. Isaiah's expression shifted, something like sympathy flickering across his features. I am sorry for your loss, madam. Recent? 6 weeks. She took a sip of coffee, using the heat of it to push back the tears that always seemed to be hovering just behind her eyes. And now men are coming to take the ranch because Thomas died owing money he never told me about. She did not know why she said it, why she confessed this private shame to a stranger sitting at her kitchen table. Maybe because he was a stranger, because he would ride away and take her secrets with him. Maybe because she had been alone for so long that the words just spilled out unbidden. Isaiah set down his cup carefully. How much does he owe? $3,000. To a man named Garrett who runs most of the gambling and lending in this part of Utah. His man Sutton was here yesterday, gave me 3 weeks to pay or leave. She laughed bitterly. I do not have $300, let alone $3,000. Garrett, Isaiah repeated, his voice gone flat and hard. Jack Garrett. I do not know his first name. You know him. I know of him. He is a snake who preys on desperate men and then collects from their widows. Isaiah stood abruptly, moving to the window to stare out at the mountains. 3,000 is a lot of money, but it is not impossible. Helena felt a surge of irrational hope, then pushed it down. It is impossible for me. Isaiah turned back to face her, and something in his expression had changed, hardened with purpose. Maybe not. I have been saving for a long time, madam. I have money put away. I could pay your debt. The words hung in the air between them, so unexpected that Helena was sure she had misheard. What? I could pay what your husband owed, clear the debt so you can keep your ranch. Helena stood, her chair scraping loudly against the wooden floor. That is insane. You do not even know me. Why would you do such a thing? Isaiah was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant, as though looking at something she could not see. Because I know what it is to lose everything to men like Garrett. Because I have the money and no particular use for it. Because helping you feels like the right thing to do. And what would you want in return? Helena asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. She had learned enough about the world to know that no one gave away $3,000 out of pure charity. Nothing, Isaiah said simply. I would ask for nothing back. That makes no sense. No one does something like this for nothing. He moved closer, and she could see the sincerity in his eyes, the quiet conviction. I am not no one, Mrs. Caldwell. I am just a man who has more money than he needs and a chance to do something good with it. Let me help you. Helena felt tears burning in her eyes, overwhelming and unexpected. I cannot accept this. It would not be right. Why not? Your husband made a mistake, but that does not mean you should lose everything because of it. Take the help, madam. Keep your home. She wanted to argue, wanted to maintain her pride and independence, but the truth was she had no other options. If she refused Isaiah's offer, she would lose the ranch anyway. At least this way she could stay, could keep the land her parents had worked so hard to settle. "I do not even know you," she whispered. "Then get to know me," Isaiah said. "I will stay in town for a few days, make the arrangements with Garrett. You can decide what you think of me in that time." Helena searched his face for deception, for hidden motives, but found only calm determination. "Why are you really doing this?" Isaiah looked away, his jaw tightening. "My sister lost her home to men like Garrett after her husband died. I had no money then, could not help her. She ended up in a brothel in Santa Fe, dead of consumption before she turned 30. I swore if I ever had the chance to help someone in the same situation, I would take it. This is that chance." The rawness in his voice convinced her more than any practiced speech could have. "I am sorry about your sister. So am I, every day." He picked up his hat, turning it in his hands. "I will ride into Alta and find Garrett. Should be back by nightfall to let you know it is settled." "Wait," Helena said, her heart pounding. "If you are going to do this, at least stay here instead of paying for a room in town. It is the least I can offer." Isaiah studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, madam, I will take you up on that." He left shortly after, riding down the dusty road toward Alta while Helena stood on the porch watching him go. The morning had taken on a surreal quality, as though she had stumbled into someone else's life. A stranger was going to pay $3,000 to save her ranch and wanted nothing in return. It defied all logic, all experience. Yet something in her chest loosened slightly, a knot of fear unwinding just enough to let her breathe. She spent the day in a daze, going through the motions of feeding the chickens and tending the small vegetable garden, but her mind kept circling back to Isaiah Jennings and his impossible offer. She tried to imagine what kind of man saved that much money and then gave it away to a widow he had just met. A fool, perhaps, or a saint, or something in between. The sun was sinking toward the mountains when she heard hoofbeats and saw Isaiah returning. She met him at the gate, searching his face for answers. "It is done," he said, dismounting. "I met with Garrett and paid your husband's debt in full. He gave me a receipt and a signed document stating that you owe him nothing. The ranch is yours, free and clear." Helena felt her knees go weak. She gripped the fence post for support, trying to process what he was saying. Just like that, just like that. Garrett was not happy about it, but he could not refuse legal payment. "You will not be bothered by him or his men again." "I do not know what to say," Helena whispered. "Thank you does not seem adequate." Isaiah smiled, and it transformed his serious face into something warmer, more approachable. "Thank you is plenty, madam. I am just glad I could help." That night they sat on the porch as the stars came out, brilliant and countless in the clear mountain air. Helena found herself talking about Thomas, about the good years before the gambling took hold, about her parents who had built this ranch from nothing. Isaiah listened with the kind of attention that suggested he truly cared about what she was saying, asking questions that showed he understood the weight of what she had lost. In turn, he spoke about his own travels, about years spent drifting from town to town, working as a ranch hand, a trail guide, a deputy marshal for a brief stint in Colorado. He talked about his sister Mary, about the guilt that still haunted him, about the money he had saved through years of hard work and careful living. "I never spent it because I did not know what I was saving for," he said, leaning back against the porch railing. "Maybe I was saving it for this." "For you?" Helena felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You should not say things like that." "Why not? It is the truth. The moment I saw you standing there with that rifle, something in me recognized something in you, like we were meant to cross paths. You believe in fate?" Helena asked, trying to keep her tone light even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "I believe some things happen for a reason. I believe I was meant to ride past your ranch this morning." He turned to look at her, his eyes catching the lamplight from inside the house. "I believe you were meant to let me stay." She wanted to dismiss it as romantic nonsense, but the words resonated with something deep inside her. She had felt it too, that sense of recognition, of rightness. "I am still in mourning," she said softly. "It has only been 6 weeks since Thomas died." "I know," Isaiah said. "I am not trying to rush you into anything. I am just being honest about what I feel." They sat in companionable silence after that, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, the distant howl of coyotes, the rustle of wind through the aspens. Helena felt something shift inside her, a door opening that she had thought was locked forever. Isaiah stayed. 1 day turned into 3, then a week. He fixed the sagging gate and repaired a section of fence that had been damaged by winter storms. He helped Helena plant additional vegetables in the garden and showed her a better way to rotate the cattle through the pastures. He never pushed, never demanded anything, but his presence became a comfort she had not realized she needed. They fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side during the day and talking on the porch at night. Helena found herself watching him when he did not know she was looking, admiring the capable way he handled every task, the gentleness in his rough hands when he treated a horse's sore hoof. She noticed the way he looked at her too, with a mixture of respect and longing that made her breath catch. 2 weeks after Isaiah had paid her debt, Helena woke in the middle of the night from a nightmare about Sutton and Garrett's men coming back. She lay in the darkness, her heart racing, until she heard the creak of floorboards in the hallway. A soft knock sounded at her door. "Madam, I heard you cry out. Are you all right?" She pulled a shawl around her shoulders and opened the door. Isaiah stood there in his undershirt and trousers, his hair disheveled from sleep, concern etched across his features. "Just a bad dream," she said, though her voice shook. "You want to talk about it?" She did not, but she also did not want to be alone. "Would you sit with me for a while?" They went to the kitchen and she made tea, her hands trembling slightly as she poured the hot water. Isaiah sat across from her, waiting patiently until she was ready to speak. "I keep dreaming that Garrett's men come back, that they take everything anyway. That you paying the debt was just another dream and I am going to wake up and lose it all." The words tumbled out in a rush. "I keep waiting for something terrible to happen because nothing this good ever lasts." Isaiah reached across the table and took her hand, his grip warm and steady. "I am real. This is real. You are safe, Helena. I promise you that." It was the first time he had used her given name, and hearing it in his voice did something to her. She looked down at their joined hands, at the contrast of his weathered skin against her pale fingers, and felt a surge of emotion so powerful it stole her breath. "I do not want you to leave," she whispered. "Then I will not leave," Isaiah said simply. "I will stay as long as you want me here." "What about your travels? Your drifting?" "I have been looking for a reason to stop for a long time. Maybe I found it." Helena looked up and met his eyes, seeing the truth of what he felt written plainly across his face. She should have been frightened by the intensity of it, should have pulled away, but instead she held on tighter. "Thomas has only been gone 2 months. I know, and I will wait as long as you need, but I need you to know that I am not going anywhere. I am here, and I am yours if you want me." Tears spilled down her cheeks, hot and unexpected. "I should not want this so soon. I should still be grieving." "You are grieving," Isaiah said gently. "But that does not mean you cannot also feel other things. Life does not stop just because we lose someone. Your husband would not want you to be alone forever. You did not know him." "No, but I know that if I loved someone the way he must have loved you, I would want them to be happy after I was gone. I would want them to live." Helena stood abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the darkness. She could feel Isaiah behind her, patient and steady as stone. "What if I am not ready? What if I never am?" "Then we will be friends," he said. "I will help you run the ranch and we will build a life as partners, nothing more. Whatever you can give, Helena, it will be enough." She turned to face him, this man who had appeared out of nowhere and changed everything. "Why are you so good?" "I am not," Isaiah said with a slight smile. "I am just a man who knows what he wants and is not afraid to work for it." "And what do you want?" He crossed the room slowly, giving her time to move away if she chose. When he stood in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, he spoke quietly but firmly. "I want to wake up every morning and see your face. I want to work this land with you and build something that lasts. I want to make you smile the way you did yesterday when that foal was born. I want you, Helena, in whatever way you will have me." Her hands came up of their own accord, resting against his chest where she could feel his heart beating strong and steady. "I am frightened." "So am I," he admitted, "but I think the best things in life are a little frightening." She did not remember making the decision to kiss him, but suddenly her lips were on his and his arms were around her, pulling her close. It was different from kissing Thomas, both familiar and entirely new, and it felt like coming home and setting out on an adventure at the same time. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Helena rested her forehead against his chest. "This is crazy," she whispered. "Maybe," Isaiah agreed, his hands gentle as they stroked her hair. "But maybe crazy is exactly what we both need." They stood there in the kitchen as the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, holding each other and not speaking. Helena felt pieces of herself that had been broken start to realign, not the same as before but stronger for having been shattered and rebuilt. In the weeks that followed, their relationship deepened in ways both profound and simple. Isaiah moved his bedroll out of the spare room and into Helena's bed, and she learned the geography of his body the way she had once learned the terrain of her ranch. They worked together during the day with an efficiency born of growing understanding, and at night they lay tangled together, talking about dreams and fears and the future they were building. The people of Alta noticed, of course. Small towns always did. Some whispered that Helena was disrespecting Thomas's memory by taking up with another man so soon. Others, particularly the women who knew what it meant to be alone and vulnerable, approved quietly. The local pastor, a practical man named Reverend Mills, came to visit one afternoon and found Isaiah repairing the barn roof. "I heard you paid Mrs. Caldwell's debt to Garrett," he said without preamble. "Word travels fast," Isaiah replied, not pausing in his work. "It does in a town this size." "That was a generous thing you did." "It was the right thing." Reverend Mills studied him for a long moment. "You planning to stay, if she will have me? And your intentions are honorable." Isaiah climbed down from the roof, meeting the older man's gaze steadily. "I love her, Reverend. I intend to marry her if she will say yes and spend the rest of my life making sure she never regrets it. She has been through a lot, I know. I will not add to her pain if I can help it." The Reverend nodded slowly. "See that you do not. She is a good woman who deserves happiness." He paused, then added, "Bring her to church on Sunday. Let people see you together properly." They went to church that Sunday, Helena in a new dress that was not quite so relentlessly black, Isaiah in his cleanest shirt with his hair combed back. They sat together in a middle pew, and Helena felt the weight of every eye in the congregation. But Isaiah took her hand openly, his grip reassuring, and Reverend Mills gave a sermon about forgiveness and new beginnings that felt directed at anyone inclined to judge. Afterward, several women approached Helena, offering quiet words of support. Mrs. Patterson, whose husband had died in a mining accident 5 years prior, squeezed her hand and said, "Do not let them make you feel guilty for living, dear. Life is too short and too hard to spend it alone when you do not have to." That afternoon, Isaiah proposed properly, getting down on one knee in the parlor while Helena stared at him in shock. "I know we have not been together long," he said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "And I know some people will say it is too soon, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Helena Caldwell. I love your strength and your courage and the way you face each day even when it is hard. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, if you will let me. Will you marry me?" Helena felt tears streaming down her face, but for once they were tears of joy rather than grief. "Yes," she said, pulling him to his feet and into her arms. "Yes, I will marry you." They were wed a month later in a simple ceremony at the church, with half the town in attendance. Helena wore a dress the color of cream, and Isaiah could not stop smiling the entire day. She moved through the celebration in a daze of happiness, hardly able to believe that the man beside her, solid and real and devoted, was now her husband. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, a claiming and a surrender on both sides. Afterward, Helena lay in Isaiah's arms and felt a peace she had not known since before Thomas died, maybe even before that. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what? For saving me, for staying, for loving me." Isaiah kissed her forehead gently. "You saved yourself, Helena. You were strong enough to survive on your own. I just gave you a reason not to have to." Summer melted into autumn, the aspens turning gold and orange on the mountainsides. They worked together to prepare for winter, cutting wood and preserving food, and reinforcing the barn against the snow that would inevitably come. Helena found herself laughing more, the heavy weight of grief lifting gradually to reveal the woman she had been before Thomas's mistakes had threatened to destroy everything. Isaiah proved to be everything Thomas had not been. He was steady where Thomas had been impulsive, honest where Thomas had been secretive, present where Thomas had been distant. Helena felt guilty sometimes for comparing them, for loving Isaiah more freely than she had ever loved her first husband, but she was learning to forgive herself for that too. One evening in late September, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set behind the mountains, Helena spoke the thought that had been growing in her mind for weeks. "I want a family with you, children." Isaiah turned to her, his eyes warm. "Are you sure? We do not have to rush into anything." "I am 30 years old," Helena said. "Thomas and I tried for years, but it never happened. I do not know if it is possible for me, but I want to try. With you." He pulled her into his lap, holding her close. "Then we will try, and if it does not happen, that will be all right too. You are enough for me, Helena. Everything else is just a blessing." Winter came hard and cold, burying the ranch under feet of snow. They spent long nights by the fire, reading to each other from the few books they owned and making love in the warm cocoon of their bed. The isolation that had once terrified Helena now felt like a gift, time stolen from the world to build their life together. Spring arrived like a promise kept, the snow melting to reveal tender green shoots pushing through the earth. Helena woke one morning in April feeling nauseated and knew before the doctor confirmed it that she was pregnant. Isaiah's joy was boundless and pure, his hands gentle as they rested on her still flat belly. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby." The pregnancy was not easy. Helena was sick for months, unable to keep down more than broth and crackers. Isaiah tended her with infinite patience, holding her hair when she vomited and rubbing her back when the cramps came. As summer turned toward autumn again, her belly grew round and full, and she felt the baby moving inside her like a secret miracle. On a cold November night in 1879, with snow falling soft and steady outside, Helena went into labor. The midwife from town came to help, and Isaiah paced the floor of the parlor, listening to Helena's cries and feeling helpless in a way he had never experienced before. After 12 hours, a baby's wail pierced the air. The midwife emerged from the bedroom, smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Jennings." A healthy baby boy. Isaiah rushed into the room to find Helena propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a quilt. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "Isaiah, meet your son." He took the baby carefully, awed by the tiny perfect features, the shock of dark hair, the miniature fingers that wrapped around his thumb. "He is beautiful. You are beautiful. Thank you for this gift." They named him Thomas Isaiah Jennings, honoring both the past and the present. Helena had worried that Isaiah might object to using her first husband's name, but he had insisted. "He was your husband, and no matter what mistakes he made, he was part of your life. Our son can carry his name with pride." Watching Isaiah with their baby, Helena felt her heart expand in ways she had not thought possible. He was a devoted father from the first moment, changing diapers and walking the floor at night when Thomas woke crying, singing old trail songs in a surprisingly good voice until the baby settled. The years that followed were not without challenges. There were harsh winters and dry summers, cattle that got sick and crops that failed. But they faced each obstacle together, their partnership growing stronger with every trial. They added to the ranch, buying more land and building a larger barn. They became pillars of the small community in Alta, known for their generosity and fairness. 2 years after Thomas was born, Helena gave birth to a daughter they named Mary Catherine, after Isaiah's sister and Helena's mother. Another 2 years brought twin boys, James and Joseph, and the house that had once been so quiet and lonely rang with the sound of children's laughter. Isaiah proved to be as devoted to his children as he was to Helena, playing with them tirelessly and teaching them everything he knew about ranching and horses and being good people. Helena watched him sometimes when he did not know she was looking and felt gratitude so profound it brought tears to her eyes. This man who had appeared out of nowhere and saved her from ruin had given her a life richer than anything she had imagined possible. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they stood together on the porch where they had first sat and talked under the stars. The ranch had grown and prospered. The house expanded to accommodate their family. Their oldest son was nearly 9 now, already showing signs of the man he would become, and the younger children were asleep in their beds, worn out from the party that afternoon. "You ever regret it?" Helena asked, leaning into Isaiah's embrace. "Giving up your freedom to settle here with me?" Isaiah laughed softly. "Not for a single moment. This is what I was searching for all those years without knowing it. You are my freedom, Helena. You and our children and this life we have built." "I love you," she said, the words still carrying the weight of wonder even after a decade. "I do not say it enough." "You say it every day in 100 different ways," Isaiah replied, kissing her temple. "But I never get tired of hearing it either. I love you too, more than I thought it was possible to love anyone." They stood there in the gathering twilight, watching the mountains turn purple in the fading light, and Helena thought about the woman she had been that morning when Isaiah first arrived. That woman had been broken and desperate, certain that her life was over. She could not have imagined then the happiness that waited just beyond her grief, the love that would heal wounds she thought were permanent. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the milestones of their children's lives. Thomas grew into a serious young man who shared his father's quiet strength and his mother's determination. Mary became a beauty with a kind heart and a sharp mind. The twins were wild and energetic, keeping their parents on their toes but bringing endless joy. When Thomas was 15, he asked his mother about his namesake, about the man who had been her first husband. Helena took him up to the cemetery on the hill, where wildflowers still bloomed every spring around the simple headstone. He made mistakes, she told her son honestly. But he was not a bad man, just a weak one. He loved me in his way and I loved him, but sometimes love is not enough if there is no foundation of trust and partnership. Do you miss him? Thomas asked. Helena considered the question carefully. I did, terribly, for a long time. But I have been blessed with a life I could not have imagined back then. Your father saved me in more ways than just paying that debt. He showed me what a true partnership could be. Papa never talks much about how you met, Thomas said. It was fate, Helena said with a smile. Or luck, or the hand of God. He rode past at exactly the moment I needed him most, and he stayed when he could have left. That is the measure of a man, son. Not that he never makes mistakes, but that he stands firm when things are hard. They walked back to the house together, and Helena watched her son go to find his father in the barn. She stood at the kitchen window, looking out at the land that had nearly been taken from her so many years ago, and felt a contentment that ran bone deep. That night, after the children were in bed, Isaiah found her in their bedroom brushing out her hair. Silver threaded through the dark strands now, and lines marked her face, but to him she was more beautiful than ever. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, coming to stand behind her. "About how lucky I am," Helena said. "About how close I came to losing everything." Isaiah took the brush from her hand and began gently working through her hair himself. "You would have survived even without me. You are the strongest person I know, maybe, but I would not have thrived. You gave me more than money, Isaiah. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me love when I thought I would never feel it again. You gave me this beautiful life." He set down the brush and wrapped his arms around her from behind, both of them looking at their reflection in the mirror. "You gave me purpose," he said quietly. "I was drifting, looking for something I could not name, and then I saw you standing there with that rifle, fierce and frightened and so beautiful it made my chest ache. I knew in that moment that I had found what I was searching for." "My hero," Helena teased gently, but her eyes were bright with tears. "No," Isaiah said seriously. "Your partner, your equal, your love. That is all I ever wanted to be." She turned in his arms and kissed him, pouring a decade of gratitude and devotion into the touch. They made love slowly, tenderly, with the familiarity of long practice and the passion that had never dimmed. Afterward, Helena lay in his arms and listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong, and knew that whatever challenges the future brought, they would face them together. The years rolled on, bringing both joy and sorrow. Isaiah's hair turned silver and his back grew stiff from decades of hard work, but he never stopped looking at Helena with devotion in his eyes. They celebrated the marriages of their children and welcomed grandchildren with open arms. The ranch prospered under their careful stewardship, becoming one of the most successful in the territory. When Utah achieved statehood in 1896, they stood with their children and grandchildren watching the celebrations, marveling at how much the world had changed since that spring day in 1878 when a wandering cowboy had stopped to chop wood for a desperate widow. "Would you do it again?" Helena asked him that night as they lay in bed, both of them gray-haired and lined but still deeply in love. "If you could go back, would you make the same choice?" Isaiah pulled her closer, his arms still strong despite his age. "Every single time, in every possible world. I would find you and save you and love you over and over again, even though it cost you everything you had saved." "It did not cost me anything," Isaiah said firmly. "It bought me everything. You, our children, this life. That $3,000 was the best investment I ever made." Helena laughed, the sound still able to light up his world after nearly 40 years together. "You are a sentimental old fool." "I am your sentimental old fool," he corrected, "and I would not have it any other way." They lived to see the new century dawn, celebrating together in 1900 with their family gathered around them. By then, they had 12 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren, the house always full of noise and laughter and love. The ranch that Helena had nearly lost had become a legacy, something that would pass down through generations. Isaiah died peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1902, with Helena beside him as she had been for so many years. She held his hand and told him she loved him, and felt his fingers squeeze hers one last time before he slipped away. The grief was profound but different from what she had felt when Thomas died. This was the sorrow of losing a partner who had been everything a husband should be, tempered by gratitude for the decades they had shared. At his funeral, she spoke about the day they met, about the stranger who had paid her debt and asked for nothing back, except a chance to prove himself worthy of her love. "He was the best man I ever knew," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "He saved my life, and then he made it worth living." They buried him on the hill beside Thomas, and Helena visited both graves every day until her own death 3 years later. Her children found her one morning in her chair on the porch, a peaceful expression on her face, looking out at the mountains she had loved for so long. They laid her to rest between her 2 husbands, though everyone knew where her heart had always truly belonged. The headstone was simple but said everything that mattered. Helena Caldwell Jennings, beloved mother, grandmother, and wife. Saved by love and grace. The ranch stayed in the family for generations, each inheriting not just the land but the story of how it had been saved by a cowboy who asked for nothing back, except the chance to love a woman who needed saving. It became a legend in Alta, passed down through the years, a reminder that sometimes the greatest gifts come from unexpected places, and that true love can bloom even in the hardest soil. And on quiet spring evenings, when the wind blew down from the mountains and the aspens whispered their secrets, people swore they could see 2 figures standing on the old porch, hand in hand, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, together at last and forever.